The year was 2011. A wave of change was sweeping across the Arab world. From the bustling streets of Tunis to the iconic Tahrir Square in Cairo, people were rising up against decades of authoritarian rule. This was the Arab Spring, a season of hope and upheaval that would reshape the political landscape of the Middle East. Syria, under the iron-fisted rule of Bashar al-Assad, was not immune to this tide of change. In March 2011, a seemingly insignificant act of defiance ignited a firestorm. A group of teenagers in the southern city of Daraa, inspired by the events unfolding in neighboring countries, spray-painted anti-government slogans on a school wall. Their act, a youthful cry for freedom, was met with brutal repression. The regime responded with swift and merciless force, arresting and torturing the teenagers. The incident in Daraa proved to be a tipping point. What began as a local protest against the detention of a few teenagers quickly escalated into a nationwide uprising against the Assad regime. Protests fueled by years of pent-up anger and frustration over corruption, inequality, and lack of political freedoms erupted across the country. People from all walks of life, students, teachers, doctors, laborers, took to the streets, demanding change. The regime's response was swift and brutal. Security forces opened fire on peaceful protesters, killing dozens in the early days of the uprising. The violence only emboldened the protesters, who continued to pour into the streets, their chants for freedom echoing through the ancient cities and villages of Syria. The world watched with a mix of hope and trepidation as a nation, long suppressed under authoritarian rule, rose up to demand its rights. Syria, once a byword for stability in a turbulent region, was now on the precipice of a revolution. The Assad regime, facing an unprecedented challenge to its authority, doubled down on its use of force. Peaceful protests were met with live ammunition, arbitrary arrests, and widespread torture. The regime seemed determined to crush the uprising, no matter the cost. As the body count mounted, the nature of the conflict began to shift. What had started as a peaceful movement for political change was morphing into an armed rebellion. Defectors from the Syrian army, disgusted by the regime's brutality against its own people, began to take up arms. In July 2011, the Free Syrian Army, or FSA, was formed, uniting various armed groups under a loose command structure. The FSA, composed mainly of defectors and civilian volunteers, vowed to protect protesters and fight for the overthrow of the Assad regime. The country descended into a brutal civil war. The FSA, outgunned and outmanned, fought a guerrilla war against the regime's forces, who unleashed the full might of their arsenal on civilian areas. Cities and towns across Syria became battlegrounds, transformed into landscapes of rubble and despair. The conflict took on a sectarian dimension, further complicating the already volatile situation. Syria, a mosaic of different religious and ethnic groups, was torn apart by sectarian violence. The Assad regime, dominated by the Alawite sect, an offshoot of Shia Islam, was accused of targeting Sunni Muslims, who made up the majority of the population. The conflict, once a struggle for freedom and dignity, was now being framed along sectarian lines, fueling a cycle of violence and revenge. As the Syrian civil war raged on, a new threat emerged from the chaos extremist groups. Exploiting the power vacuum and the widespread disillusionment with the international community's inaction, these groups found fertile ground to spread their ideology and recruit fighters. Among them, two groups rose to prominence: the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, known as ISIS, and Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. ISIS, notorious for its brutality and its ambition to establish a caliphate, seized control of large swaths of territory in eastern Syria and western Iraq. The group imposed its draconian interpretation of Islamic law, carrying out public executions, beheadings, and other atrocities. ISIS's reign of terror sent shockwaves through the region and beyond, attracting international attention and condemnation. Jabhat al-Nusra, while sharing a similar ideology with ISIS, focused its efforts on toppling the Assad regime. The group gained a reputation for its military prowess and its ability to exploit the grievances of the local population. Al-Nusra, though designated as a terrorist organization by the United States and other Western powers, was seen by some segments of the Syrian population as a more effective fighting force against the regime than the fractured and often disorganized FSA. The rise of extremist groups added another layer of complexity to the already multifaceted Syrian conflict. The revolution, which had begun with such hope and promise, was now being overshadowed by the specter of sectarianism and extremism. The international community, slow to react to the initial uprising, was now faced with the daunting task of confronting a growing jihadist threat in the heart of the Middle East. The Syrian civil war, from its early days, became a proxy war, a tragic chessboard upon which regional and global powers played out their geopolitical rivalries. The Assad regime, backed by Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, faced off against a loose coalition of rebel groups supported by the United States, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Each player, motivated by their own strategic interests and ideological leanings, poured weapons, money, and fighters into the conflict, fueling the flames of war and further complicating the prospects for peace. Russia, a longtime ally of the Assad regime, provided crucial military support, deploying its air force in 2015 to prop up the regime's faltering forces. Russian airstrikes, often indiscriminate in their targeting, caused widespread civilian casualties and destruction, but they also succeeded in turning the tide of the war in favor of the regime. Iran, seeing in Assad a crucial link in its axis of resistance against Israel in the West, provided military advisors, weapons, and funding to the regime. Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shia militia, also entered the fray, deploying thousands of fighters to bolster the regime's ground forces. On the other side of the conflict, the United States, while initially hesitant to intervene militarily, provided limited support to certain rebel groups, primarily through the provision of weapons and training. However, the US's efforts were often hampered by its reluctance to become deeply entangled in another Middle Eastern conflict, and its insistence on supporting only moderate rebel factions, a distinction that proved increasingly difficult to make in the chaos of the Syrian war. Turkey, motivated by its own security concerns and its desire to prevent the establishment of an autonomous Kurdish region in northern Syria, supported various rebel groups, often playing a double game by tacitly allowing the flow of foreign fighters and weapons across its border into Syria. Saudi Arabia and Qatar, regional rivals of Iran, sought to counter Iranian influence by providing financial and military support to various rebel groups, often with little coordination or oversight. The cities of Aleppo and Raqqa have become synonymous with the devastation of war. In Aleppo, ancient structures and modern buildings alike have crumbled under relentless bombardment. Families, once thriving in vibrant communities, now find themselves displaced, searching for safety. Raqqa, once the de facto capital of ISIS, witnessed intense battles that left the city in ruins. The human cost of this conflict is staggering. Thousands have lost their lives, and countless more bear the scars of war, both visible and invisible. The resilience of the Syrian people, however, shines through even in the darkest times. Amidst the rubble, acts of kindness and solidarity remind us of the enduring human spirit. But, the road to recovery is long and fraught with challenges. Rebuilding lives and communities will require immense effort and support from the global community. As we reflect on the stories of Aleppo and Raqqa, let us remember the profound impact of conflict on ordinary lives and the enduring hope for a peaceful future. As the conflict dragged on, Assad's hold on power began to weaken. The regime faced increasing defections, economic hardships, and mounting international pressure. The once unshakable grip of the Assad family started to show cracks, signaling a potential shift in the country's future. Amidst the chaos, an interim government emerged, representing a coalition of opposition groups. This new entity promised peace and a democratic transition. Many Syrians dared to hope for a new dawn, envisioning a future free from the violence and oppression that had plagued their lives for so long. The fall of Assad brought both challenges and opportunities to Syria. Rebuilding a nation torn apart by years of conflict was no small task. Yet there was a sense of optimism, a belief that a united effort could pave the way for a brighter, more prosperous future. The road ahead was uncertain, but the possibilities were endless. Despite the promise of peace and rebuilding, Syria's future remains uncertain. The scars of war run deep, and the path to stability is fraught with obstacles. However, the resilience and determination of the Syrian people offer a glimmer of hope. As the nation moves forward, the world watches, hoping for a lasting peace and a better tomorrow.